Let Me Your Ear Productions presents an abridged dramatic reading of The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. The first act takes place in the morning room at Algernon Moncrief's flat in Half Moon Street.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. Have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir. Mr. Ernest Worthing, sir.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring. Hello, why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Ah, how utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. Oh, please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
But it's quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Well, and very good bread and butter it is, too.
My dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you are married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name. Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no use offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. Oh, however, no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Well, of course it's mine. You have seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Oh, yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Ah. Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, oh yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
Uh, my dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. For heaven's sakes, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
Oh, it isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
Well, you have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. It is perfectly absurd you saying that your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
That does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
Not until you produce your explanation. Now, pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Mrs. Prism.
Oh, where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know whether you will be able to understand my real motives. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. In order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Ernest, who gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
But the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
But that wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. What you really are is a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I have not the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, she will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want you to talk about Bunburying.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him.
And I strongly advise you to do the same with Mr. with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. If I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax,
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together. I'm sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have that cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Oh, certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
there were no cucumbers in the market this morning. I went down twice.
No cucumbers.
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I've got quite a treat for you tonight.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It's a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me, but the fact is I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program if you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Yes. Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. My ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else. Do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation and has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Yes. Well, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I must say I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen.
Yes, Mr. Worthing? Have you got something to say to me?
Well, you know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I am afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. Oh, I hope you'll always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. It is hardly a matter that you could be allowed to arrange for yourself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen.
Yes, Mamma.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29?
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. Land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure.
I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income.
A country house? You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square.
What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
I'm afraid I don't really know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, as I said, I lost my parents. It would be near the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for Worthing find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag, a somewhat large, black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes. The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life. It reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to.
May I ask you, then, what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolen refused you? I know it is a way she has. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, as far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there is any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
Oh, we have. By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about your being earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's a sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
You are sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest was carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. Ha! That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that is all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
Oh, I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take care you never do. She is excessively pretty, and she is only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolen yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolen are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first.
Miss Fairfax,
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing. Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But, although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
Yes, go away, Algy. The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now. I will see myself out.
There's a sensible intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, I love scrapes. They are the only thing that never gets serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Featured in Act 1 of The Importance of Being Earnest were Will McDonald as Jack Worthing, Jeremiah Lang as Algernon Moncrief, Kayla Ross as Lady Bracknell, Eliana Steele as Gwendolyn Fairfax, and Chris O'Brien as Lane. Thank you for listening.